There's all that magic that seems to happen by those who are born with relationship privilege, but we can all build it. It just starts with how you can become more purposeful and intentional with what you want out of not just your life, but the people around you that form your purposeful community.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by purebookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer. In part one of our two-part series with community building strategist and author David Homan, he might completely change the way you think about networking. If you've ever felt like traditional networking doesn't work, feels forced, or just isn't you, you're not alone and you're not wrong. David is about to challenge some deeply held assumptions and introduce a different way to build connections. Let's find out more right now. Our guest is a community building strategist and author of Orchestrating Connection, How to Build Purposeful Community in a Tribal World, where he teaches leaders how to transform networks into meaningful, high-impact communities. David Homan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yes, and I'd love to know a little bit about you and have you introduce yourself to our audience in a way is like, how did you end up doing what you're doing today?
So I'll start with the fact that when I was 8, I helped my mom with bookkeeping for 3 of her nonprofits. So I grew up like cutting my teeth in the world of nonprofits, philanthropy, and just keeping the engine running for a local arts organization, a local theater company, then what became a pretty large-scale regional writers workshop. And so everything I've done has been in that space of impact and service. I grew up in a small town in Florida where I was a college professor's kid. My recently late father taught Shakespeare and modern drama, so I grew up in the arts, but also in the world of how to get things done, especially on a small scale in philanthropy. And then I got to New York after college, and suddenly this big city became smaller and smaller, and I've called it my home now for 25 years. Wow. And being in New York City, part of my aspiration was to be a working classical composer. And to this date, I have 215 compositions that have been recorded and performed. So I work as an artist. Okay. But in that, because no one's ever met a living composer, especially one who pays their way through being a living composer, I did the thing that I knew well from my mother, which was I worked in the nonprofit sector for many years. And in that, through relationship building, which I didn't understand at the time was so important, my adopted grandmother's best friend brought me to a Friday night dinner at their friend's home. I met somebody there who introduced me to somebody else, and suddenly I was running events at Carnegie Hall in Lincoln Center. I was eventually then becoming the youngest executive director to run a global arts charity. And my entire world became not just how I executed, but who I know and who I could get to. And a lot of my work in Orchestrating Connection is now all centered around what I hope people would learn is not just a sophisticated methodology of how to do it, but the reason to do it for community building in the long term, rather than just the immediate outcome that many people seek.
Wow, that's a very interesting trajectory. And you've got...
Not one I expected to have.
No, it's the unexpected trajectory. I mean, all the way along and all these little pillars that you picked up along the way that sort of all came together almost in a magical way, if you will, and has led something that sounds like you're doing, living your passion on multiple areas of your life, one for getting paid and one for, maybe getting paid someday with the composing.
All that, and I mean, I do get commissioned as a composer. I actually have a retrospective of 25 years of my work with a ballet company coming up in a week or two with a big company in Vero Beach, Florida. But, source of pride, my kids see being a connector as a job. And my world has been just to show how relationship value should be more valued because it's the currency that makes the world work. It makes us connected. And it's all in the end about how we build trust with others and then what happens in relationship exchanges after you've built that trust.
Yes. And this is really powerful. Like, as you've demonstrated, you've lived this, you've lived it, and we've just heard the snapshot of how that's impacted your worlds. And I love where it's going because there is a little bit of the experience of it being magical. If you put all of these pieces together, it seems magical, but it's not. But undervalued perhaps, and not nurtured enough in this world that we live in. And I'd love to dig into that.
Let me say one part about the magical part, right? When it seems magical to people, it's magical to people who weren't born into the privilege of having relationships in their family, whether those are CEOs or wealth holders or entrepreneurs or whatever your network is. The way where we grow up, who we grow up with, who our parents or our family know, that's what we're really born into. And when I see people say like, oh, like, David, like you've built this magical network where you're interacting with celebrities and athletes and billionaires and the rest, like for me, those are just people that I know that trust me, that I've built relationships with to help them and vice versa. But I didn't inherit any of that. I had to figure out my own way to show up and how I could build it. And when we think of it as magical, what we're really often saying is, not putting these words in your mouth, but just to qualify for the listener, we're seeming like it's magical, like we couldn't create it on our own. And for those that we see that, behind the story is that their dad was a major venture capitalist. Their mom was a former, state senator. They are a fifth generation family whose family owned these 5 restaurants in DC. There's all that magic that seems to happen by those who are born with relationship privilege, but we can all build it. It just starts with how you can become more purposeful and intentional with what you want out of not just your life, but the people around you that form your purposeful community.
You nailed it. That you put words in my mouth. I think you articulated it in a way that's bang on, which is for people on the outside looking at that, it would seem like magic, and many people are not born into these initial connectors, but people with all those connectors also mess it all up too, probably more than we hear, right? And that's that. But the magic piece is that anyone can do this. And it's interesting because it's come up a lot actually recently, just in speaking with people. A friend of mine who's very good at connecting, like he can make deals, he can get in front of CEOs and get connections with the world's largest organizations almost seemingly overnight. And it's not like he has all these massive connections, but he has some really good connections. But he also spent a lot of time, he grew up in the ecosystem of a country club. And his father was like, he worked at the country club. He hung out with CEOs basically as a child. And so for him, they're just people. And I think it's a little bit of what you're saying is that he grew up in where it's like, it's just natural for him to talk to a CEO and reach out to the CEO. But he also knows that that's an important network that he leverages and where he can leverage that. But there's a couple of pieces there that when you put them together can be very powerful. But it's exciting. And I think for us and our listener that's with us today, this is in our area of opportunity and one that can produce a lot of benefit and value to their life and to their business. So maybe let's start with what you're talking about. How is it different from a professional network and this purposeful community? And why would that distinction matter for our listener?
Sure. So many professional networks are incredible. Some of them, people join, they meet a few people, and they leave. And there's a difference between those that are intentionally run and those that are really there either to be egocentric, to support the person who built it, or just a cool place for people to hang out. In my community, there's one clear interaction. which is you have to ask for what you need, and the value exchange is relationship currency, introductions. And my theory was that the more you built relationships in your past that are antithetical to you, the more that can be extremely beneficial to somebody else. And therefore it isn't, can I connect with you and help you, and can you connect and help me, even if it's relational. It's, can I help somebody in a community and at some point trust that that will come back to me. And there's a lot of frameworks and things I dig into in my book, which I ironically called Chapter 11, because that was the numerical numbering of it, not realizing I'd be recommending Chapter 11 to many people all the time. But what came about from it is what this different understanding of what a network is versus a community, what an intentional or purposeful community is, to elevate that. And therefore, everything that I try to advocate for people is, you already have a network around you. It's how you turn it in a more intentional group that differentiates how that group can support you when you're not there. They can pick you up when you are in need. And it's not dependent on what you just did for them recently in order for that to happen.
Wow. That's powerful. Chapter 11 sounds like a better place in your book than it does in other scenarios. Can you dig into a little bit? Like, give us a little snapshot of what that looks like? It's exciting.
Sure. So my approach for a very long time was not systematic. I didn't sound as eloquent as I might do now about this because I hadn't written a book about it. I hadn't talked about it. But what I did instinctually was, when I met people, whether I was feeling up to it or not, and this week that we're recording this is the week of daylight savings time, and anyone who has young children know somehow their children go to bed later than their normal bedtime and then wake up way earlier than they should, or way later. And so it plays such havoc with anyone who's a young parent. And so in my world, I would be curious no matter who I met, no matter what circumstance. I would dare to be vulnerable. You know, I mentioned a little bit ago, my late father, he passed a few months ago. He was 87, he lived a long life, but in a business context, I talk about the fact I'm struggling because I go into a context where everyone seems to be moving on, and I'm stuck with the image of my dad right after he passed, lifeless in his bed. And most people would shy away, especially business networking groups, and go, well, you can't talk about that. You should talk about the fact you work for Ray Dalio and ran a film company. You should talk about the amount of money you've raised. And I go, no, because the person who pauses to respond about my father is the person I want to talk to. The person who opens up to me with vulnerability as a strength and has the courage to share the same is then going to give me and them a much deeper degree of how we could support each other because we built trust first. And when you do that time and time again, then the person goes, you know, you should meet my friend. Their dad owns the Buffalo Bills. You should come to this thing my friend's doing. They're opening for KISS. And so that world of relationships only comes about when we build trust. It's not opportunistic, which is, I'm a lawyer, I need clients. I'm a nonprofit executive, I need donors. I'm a startup, I need investors. We always look at people to look through them to be the targets or ladders to climb. I look and I go, if I can be supportive of you and have my network help you, and then perhaps you can help somebody in my network systematically, what comes around, and this is just transforming the people around you into more intentional, is somebody comes to you and they go, you know who would be really great for you to meet? And they name the person you always wanted to meet, you never knew you could get access to, or just create an opportunity you didn't know existed because you couldn't ask, but somebody could advocate for you to get you there.
It's powerful stuff. And my condolences to your late father, to your family.
Thank you.
And it definitely brought up, as you were speaking, the way you put it, the seeing your father lifeless, and I'm not getting the words exactly right there, but
you did.
It's like I do myself have a similar experience. I was blessed with the opportunity to be with him in his last years, and then moments, and after, right through to the end. And I certainly couldn't speak as easily about it now, and that's now 10 years ago, 11 years ago now. So I get that, and it sounds like your father was an incredible mentor to you and special person in your life, and my father was to me as well. So it
Why, Mike, I appreciate you sharing that back. And even though it seems to some like that's 10 years ago, it always seems like it's 10 years or a day,
oh yeah,
um, months or a
yeah.
day. Like this is one of those losses I was asked to explain to a friend who hadn't lost a parent or a significant family member. And the
Hmm.
only thing I could do was describe to them and say, it's like when you're like running in a field and you step in a hole and you think it's like surprisingly 6 inches deep, except for this is 8 feet deep.
Mm,
And you fall in it and like you don't people who haven't been there don't understand.
yeah.
And again, this might seem antithetical to what networking is, but at a family office conference yesterday, a friend of mine asked how I was doing with my dad, and the person next to him started sharing about hers. And that person was one of the most known billionaires in New York, and my interaction with her was about missing our dads
Hmm.
and how we felt like it made us grow up overnight but just want to run back to be little kids again. And so in my world now, when I follow up with her, the bond is no longer seen as opportunistic from her side or on my side as something to climb towards. It's simply a bond. And everything that I've studied in this, a decade of looking at the data science and relationships and going from a network of barely anyone, I played flag football when I was in fourth grade with Emmett Smith, the famous Gator then cowboy, because my dad's friend taught him ballet and his nephew was in my fourth grade class. So like that was my quote, like closeness to greatness. And everything I've built has been doing the opposite of what most business networking teaches. Surround yourself with the people who can be in your ecosystem, who look like you, talk like you, who went to the same schools. If you're a lawyer, then don't talk to a lawyer who does the same type of law. And in my world, I'm thinking, well, there's a lawyer who's turning down certain clients and accepting others because they're not right. If you were the feeder for that person and they were the feeder to you, even if you're at rival firms, eventually there'll be more out of it by being accepting of the other than limiting their role in your life, because competition is different than collaboration.
100%. And it's like human, the human aspect of connecting with people, like you and I are talking about our fathers, and that's a foundation that we have in common. And so many times people are meeting transactionally, and it's surface level. And I think I have young kids. You also mentioned young kids, and you actually you actually nailed my last night sitting on the couch wondering, why are these kids still up? Because not only do they stay up later and go to, sleep longer, it's almost like they've got this permission to stay up later. Like they're not only is it already later, it's like, oh, well, we're just, it's almost like we're so far into chaos, we might as well take it further, right?
That's exactly it. And every single parent who goes through this does not understand, but it's almost every parent I know is sitting in this weird world where you're like, well, normally they went to bed. My kids are almost 9 and 12. Like normally by like 8:15 we're reading. Now it's like 9 o'clock at night and they're still just starting to read. Then it's 9:45 at night, which is 8:45 in their bodies. And now they're pretending like they should maybe go out and like play a game or a board game. And then
Yes.
come early, they either sleep in and they're cranky and you wish you could feed them coffee, or they're up crazy early again. And like everyone suffers who from daylight savings, even those who need it, who are farming and the rest. But it's just crazy, but it's a bonding moment. And years ago at an event I was on a board related to theater education, and two extraordinary prominent people were sitting there looking like they were dead on their feet. And I walked up to them and I said, "You must have young kids. Why did they go to bed so late when it should be earlier?" And they started laughing. And then those became two of my most trusted friends in this world of family offices I'm also in. But we bonded over the same thing we're talking about now, which is the insanity of daylight savings for young kids.
Mm.
Not a business topic, not how to
Mhm.
get a client, except for now what happens when you go, hey, I know you mentioned those family offices. There's actually a really interesting group out of Detroit I've been trying to meet. I think that I could work well with them. do you happen to know them? And if you ask that when we first meet, I'll go, I'm sorry, I'm very busy. I'd love to help. If you ask the same thing after we've spent 20 minutes actually hearing each other, it'll be surprising if I haven't offered already, because so few of us listen, so few of us build a bond without the other person waiting for the ask. If you don't make it, then the person wants you to ask, which is a whole different ballgame in terms of getting what would need to be a referral.
This is interesting stuff because we have this world where it's very digital as well. AI is playing a massive role in doing a lot of things for us, and it's this idea of being purposeful around your community, your connections, your network, being a human. It's almost one of these, like I think for my kids, if anything in life, the better you are at being a human being is probably one of the moats that you want to focus on. And surrounding yourself with like people like that, you mentioned this word purposeful. Purposeful network is like kids, who they hang out with and who they go and be around matters, just like my friend. He was around CEOs versus hanging around the pop shop. And then also nurturing this way of being human. It's human to actually care about the other person that you're meeting and to be interested in them, which is I think we've moved away from because of social media, because of the digital world. And I'd love to get your take on that, because, we have our world, like whether people have large LinkedIn networks or Instagram or whatever it is, are they really doing anything with that? Because at the end of the day, it's just a digital clickety-clack happening.
So the irony of all of it is we all know how we want to be approached. We just don't approach others in the way that we want to be approached. No one wants to be assaulted by somebody's bio for 30 minutes and a question asked and feel like they don't matter when the person moves on to the next person. And yet we do this to others all the time. Everyone seems totally fine on a first date with the most gorgeous person they've ever met, having a conversation where they basically present themselves and talk about everything they need, and then that person never calls them back because that person wasn't heard. And so to answer your question, in the digital world, like I'm never going to meet you at a conference and be like, this is my friend Tim. He's my LinkedIn follower. He follows me on Instagram, or we've been Facebook friends for 17 years, want to see our photo montage. Like everyone would laugh at the absurdity of thinking that's what matters. Or if you even said, like, this is my guest, David, he made a comment on LinkedIn yesterday and 14,000 people viewed it. So what? That's not substance. It's not how any human listening would want to connect humanely. And so social media is a distraction from that. It's a major vehicle to connect people, but we can't forget the founding principles of what connection is based on. And we have to merge that with what is the strategy for why we need to combat our isolation, to combat our loneliness, to create opportunity, but to build community while doing it. So, in my book, which you had mentioned with my co-author, Noah Askin, like we built 5 principles. And there are books on each of these 5. And those principles are curiosity and vulnerability. Middle one is diversity. And the final 2 are generosity and gratitude. Those are all really beautiful things that people tell you should have. To actually embrace all of them in a system is incredibly hard. When I meet you, can I be more curious about you than can you be about me? Can I offer just enough for vulnerability on my side to have you open up to trust the same? And is the person I approach, this is the diversity part, is that person that I approach somebody who is exactly like me? Color, race, height, occupation, geography, because usually that means it's a boring conversation. The more diverse your network, not just to gender correct or diverse correct, the more diverse the network, the more strategic it is because people are in different circles, different worlds. And if the first thing you can do as somebody has built trust with you and you've asked enough questions is to offer to help, that act of generosity, people don't see that as something that either they can do or they don't understand why, But the entire world of digital marketing is trying to get that world for you to tell them what you want so they can sell you it.
Mm.
So when you build trust with somebody and they tell you what they need, think about the insight you have. Now you can build trust and help somebody with something that they want. It might be that they need a recommendation for a lawyer or an accountant. It might be that they want to know about this country club, and does your friend that you mentioned actually think it's still worth going to? The needs can be open, because if you get somebody to say what they need, they're actually saying something they can't meet themselves, or something that they didn't think could be helped and they're just sitting on. And the final point, which the word is gratitude, but the way I call it in my community is called honoring the chain of connections. If you ask somebody to honor something that you've done for them by getting them to open up and be curious and vulnerable, then you build trust. And once you have trust, you see how the world of business actually works. There's a reason why people stay with a client for years, because they built a trust and a bond, and that client stays with them. There's a reason why when certain businesses are going under, then the person can just make a few calls and get the loan they need. There's a reason why this happens, and it is not opportunity, it is trust. It is this underlying currency that comes from understanding the system underneath relationships and starting to see, and this is my final point with this, starting to see relationships as the ultimate currency that we spend our time and we spend our money on building, because the biggest yacht in the world doesn't help you not be lonely. But the success with a friend to earn that and still have that friend with you is worth 1,000,000 times more. And we seem to have divorced these two in the way business works, in the way we think of acceptance in social media. And it's why we have such a loneliness epidemic, a mental health epidemic, this sense of isolation, of feeling powerless in a digital world of insane connectivity to actually know how to connect. Because everywhere I go, I ask people questions. 70% of them never ask me something back.
Interesting. So with that, I'm curious now, we have this digital world. We went through COVID. People were separated, working from home. Lots of businesses are, people are moving to running their own businesses, small, micro, whatever size, but, they work from home. Lots are going back to the office as well. But how do you see that impact, and how does someone go from, obviously this great connection, LinkedIn, social media is super powerful stuff, but where the gold is in what you're talking about, making these human connections and being purposeful about it. How do you recommend people, and maybe this is in the book, start to get away from that? Because if someone like myself, I have young kids as well, as I mentioned, a 7-year-old daughter and 10, almost 11-year-old son. One plays a lot of sports. I get out. I'm forced, not forced. I do it. Forced doesn't sound like it.
No. I totally understand it.
Gladly do it, but I'm out and amongst people, and I'm not there other than I'm there all centered around this sports. And it's very fulfilling for me to watch my son do these things, but also I have social interaction and connecting with all these different people. But I would imagine many people don't have that. So, and I'd just love to get your take. I'm sure you see this, and maybe it's part of the book, but it's people have to take actions if they're not getting out amongst humans.
Yeah. So when I was 12, I quit piano and I started playing, among other things, Under the Bridge. And that line, it's hard to believe there's no one out there. It's hard to believe that I'm all alone, right? Like, everyone feels that. Like, you might have that through the sports that you absolutely lovingly and purposely do to embrace your kids' excellence in it. But not everyone feels they can. But everyone comes from somewhere. There are people who have helped them. So the first thing I say is understand what you already have. This isn't just about getting out there, especially because so many of us are introverts or need empathy in our interactions to not feel like it's some awkward middle school phase again. And in that, I tell everyone, just think about the people who helped you, or an introduction, an offer, an act of generosity. changed your life, made you feel more fulfilled. Somebody could say, hey, you just moved to this town, join my friend Susan's book club. It doesn't matter what it is. It matters what were their actions taken. First step is, can you call up those people and just say, I was thinking about this and I wanted to say thank you. You inviting me to that book club when I moved to this town was the first offer I had of how to feel like I had a community here. And the reason I say we want all this, but we don't do it, think about, Michael, the last time somebody called and just thanked you. It is so rare.
It's rare.
In my network, it's why I call it honoring the chain. It's a gratitude chain of thank yous. It builds community. Just means thank everyone in the chain that helped you get something in your life. No one gets thanked. No group gets thanked. People don't recognize it, but you can understand you have a deeper community than you have already just by starting to map that out. And it feels really good. It's also incredibly strategic. Because when I call up somebody of prominence in this world who I've worked with, who's done something for me, and I say thank you, there's this awkward pause because what they're used to is hearing, say like a CEO that I've helped. I want to say thank you, and here's what I need. And human nature is the minute you create that void, that silence, then they come back to you and they say, well, I really appreciate that. Can I help you? What I tell everyone is, say no, because the next time you call, they'll take your call.
What an amazing conversation so far. In part 2 of the series, David Homan goes into even more practical methods as he shares how bookkeepers can turn everyday interests into real community, overcome the intimidation that holds them back, and build the kind of trust-based relationships that lead to meaningful opportunities. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.